Hi, we're Group 3, and our topic is on medical device security. Okay, for early development. In the 1950s and to the 1970s, the first electronic pacemakers and devices for monitoring fetal heart rate emerged, paving the way for the integration of electronics and medicine. In the 1970s, computer technology began to merge with medical technology, also used for storing medical records, controlling instruments, and performing robotic surgery. In the 1980s, improved computers and network technologies led to the need for data interchange protocols in healthcare, resulting in the creation of Health Level 7 standards. In 1981, Viditron created the first software-driven pacemaker. In 1991, the Institute of Medicine published computer-based patient record, an essential technology for healthcare, highlighting the possibilities of electronic medical records. And in the 2000s, the increasing complexity of medical devices enabled by software led to concerns about their vulnerability to unauthorized parties, particularly implantable medical devices. Now we go to the rise of network devices and concerns. In 2003, Viditron created the first digital pacemaker. In 2005, the FDA issued its first guidance for industry on connecting medical devices. And in 2006, medical device software has reached a tipping point, with 50% of medical devices being either standalone software packages or devices with software-driven functionality. In 2011, the FDA issued the Medical Device Data System Rule, clarifying medical device regulation to include software and wireless hardware. In 2011 to the present time, concerns about medical device hacking became mainstream, with examples of vulnerabilities in insulin pumps and other devices gaining significant media attention. And now we're going to talk about the present.
Okay, well, thank you, Celine, for getting us started and giving us that overview of the origin of networked medical devices and why this is even a topic in cybersecurity in 2025 today. It's truly amazing to think just how quickly our culture and specifically the healthcare industry has become so advanced with technology. If you could imagine being a doctor or maybe a nurse 100 years ago, it would look almost completely different, I would imagine. I'm not a nurse or a doctor than it does today. But I'm extremely grateful for how technology has been leveraged to make for more efficient healthcare systems and an overall safer public. Now, interestingly, this is actually a personal topic for me because my wife is a nurse and the hospital that she works at experienced a significant cyber attack and were forced to pay a ransom just last year. So for the couple of weeks that they had limited access to their systems, it was insane to see how big of an impact having even just some of their systems offline had on the staff. Nurses were having to write everything down, and some important allergy information for patients was just not automatically populated on a screen, and it could cause a lot more confusion and difficulty and stress for the healthcare workers. So how does medical device security specifically relate to the broader healthcare industry security perspective as a whole? Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, hopefully unsurprisingly, unsecured or poorly secured medical devices are an ever-increasing attack vector for malicious actors. This article that was published by IEEE, entitled A Novel Approach to Medical Device IT Security Landscape Analysis Leveraging Manufacturer Disclosure Statements, cites these medical devices as being key factors in many healthcare-related cyber attacks. And are there a lot of cyber attacks in the healthcare industry? Unfortunately, there are. Between 2016 and 2023, more than 4,700 medical institutions worldwide were victims of cyber attacks. This is not a small number. These data breaches, ransomware demands, denial of services, and other malicious actions resulted in exposing some of the most sensitive data that a person could possibly possess, being risked and exposed for millions of individuals. These attacks have the ability to result in the loss of life, lack of proper care, and an increase of stress, difficulty, and unnecessary strain on thousands of healthcare workers. Now, While the technology that is advancing medical equipment is a huge boon to patient health, it is in many cases an unsecured liability. And it can recall the common phrase that with great power comes great responsibility. Even as there is great power and benefit derived from these devices, so is there a greater responsibility to secure them. So, what exactly are these medical devices that we're talking about? Surely not everything is connected to the internet, and that's true, but a surprising amount are. Here are some examples of medical devices connected to the internet, or what's sometimes referred to as the Internet of Medical Things, IoMT. These can range from smartwatches and fitness trackers to continuous glucose monitors, smart insulin pumps, remote ECG monitors that will send heart data to cardiologists, blood pressure monitors at hospitals. It can be things like infusion pumps, ventilators, patient monitoring systems, anesthesia machines, pacemakers, defibrillators, excuse me, and even neurostimulators. Now, while in theory, it could be possible, and maybe it has happened before, that a hacker has messed with anesthesia machines to provide wrong readings and possibly cause an anesthesia overdose, this does not really seem to be the significant worry or serious attack vector, at least today, right now, due to the specifics and kind of niche scenario that would represent. Instead, what does seem to be a greater security threat is these insecure medical devices being a point of entry onto a hospital or healthcare facility network, and then attackers being able to move laterally to servers that contain important data and critical operation servers. And that is really where there's a greater chance of data exposure and cost to the healthcare situations. A lot of ransomware attacks and ransoms being paid as a result. Now, there's no way we can talk about all the things from a security perspective that should be done in the healthcare industry or in any industry. But some of the obvious discrepancies that come up when looking at these medical devices are that many of them run on outdated firmware, use outdated versions of operating systems, and are not getting updated. They might use insecure communication protocols and are unfortunately not always given the same security strictures that other internet connected devices are, or say that would make up a typical IT infrastructure. The IT people don't really feel responsible for these devices with the same level of scrutiny that they might about servers and the overall network. Now, there's no one clear solution to this dilemma. But one thing that has come up in recent years is MDS2 documentation. MDS2 is the manufacturer disclosure statement for medical device security, and it could be one potential avenue to help making medical devices up to modern standards in regards to security. One of the biggest problems with security is that there's a lack of standardization. While organizations like the FDA or NIST have released guidance, there really is not any legally mandated enforcement of security for these devices. And many hospitals or healthcare facilities don't even fill out these MDS2 forms. It should be noted that these right now are optional. Um, and so perhaps I'm talking too much about MDS2 without explaining what it is. It is a disclosure that relates to 23 different security capabilities of a device and answers a series of 216 questions. And while we can't, talk about this all right now, we'll get into the paper some is how perhaps this standard could be leveraged to provide a greater baseline or a more secure baseline for medical devices, and even possibly requiring these things to be enacted by hospitals and healthcare facilities in order to responsibly keep track of patient data and keep it secure. Obviously, this data security in pretty much any sector could improve, but that's a little bit of an overview of where we are right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Celine. So, having discussed the history and the current state of these medical devices, into the future we go. And before I get started, I would like to begin with the expression, the future is here. And I'm sure we've all heard that. And as you see on the screen, I'm going to credit a lot of that to AI, artificial intelligence. And it's one of those where, I have the question, I'm sure everyone else also has the question where it's like, man, is this something that's going to be, for the greater good, or is it going to do more damage, cause more harm? And that's nearly impossible to answer, right? Just simply because, just like with anything else, you can either leverage it for good or for bad. But one thing's for sure, one thing's certain, and that's the incorporation or the medical field incorporating AI into their medical devices. And so this leaves for great, or better efficiency, productivity, and whatnot. But it brings about risk in the security sector of things, right? So, um, based on a stat that was found in the Forbes, console paper, the FDA reported that in 2023 there were 200 plus devices that were submitted, medical devices, that is, for incorporating or having some type of AI functionality associated with it. 2024, the number hasn't been released yet, but that number's to be, or they're thinking that that number will be a lot greater. And so it's inevitable that this technology, right, is here, right, and not per se future, but we're challenged with two things: the newness of it, and the quote unquote phrase also of the AI race, right, where we have all these different nations racing and competing against one another to be the first. And in my eyes, I think that's going to leave a lot of vulnerabilities and make our lives as engineers more challenging. And so, on to the next slide with things that we already currently have to deal with, whether if that's hardware, software, data, telecommunications. Now we have to think about AI and how that's a separate layer, right? And just as a basic example where, let's say, the AI functionality of a medical device that's monitoring someone's heart rate or providing, the blood pressure rate of an individual or a patient, where now if a hacker compromises or hacks into that AI functionality and skews the data, and is now all of a sudden able to set off alarms and things like that, on the back end, that medical device then becomes a nightmare to doctors, nurses, and whatnot, as far as the readings that they're getting now, or the how do I now treat this patient with the results and the data that I'm getting. So that AI layer within itself, because it's so new, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more vulnerabilities and things we just don't know yet, where we can't put our finger on it. And it's going to make things challenging. So with that being said, the next slide kind of touches on these four things, of how we can go about, or what is it that we do now, right? And those four things are the adoption of micro segmentation, secure by design, focusing on future proofing devices, and just the culture overall of security, right? And to touch on those things briefly, um, I don't want to per se say they're things that are new, but more so that we can do a better job on, or take them more seriously, where we continue the authentication and the verification of, let's say, users having access to certain resources, whether if it's this type of medical device, or you know these type of servers that this medical device then also needs to contact or communicate with, right? Where we kind of keep those things in a bubble, where even from a user perspective, um, we're giving only certain access to those individuals that need access to those devices, right? And this is where zero trust comes in. Secure by design, not just only from a, let's say, individual or even organization perspective, but manufacturers that are creating these devices, right? Where from jump, they're having that security mentality of, okay, security is a mandate that we know is a check mark that we have to, consider when we're um, designing and creating these devices from jump, and it not being more of a feature or attribute to the device itself, right? It's more so like this is actually a piece or core piece of the device from the beginning. Focusing on future proofing them, um, same as how now we emphasize on keeping software up to date, patching firmware, and how Josh was touching on how MDS documentation being a guideline to better improve the medical field standard. This is where that comes into play, where um, like I said, it's not that we're not doing it in today's world, but we can do a better job in enhancing it. And last but not least, the culture of security, right? And that's just not within an organization, but from the folks that do MDS, documentation themselves, setting the guidelines, right? From there to the manufacturer to management, and then to the actual not just IT folks and engineers, but also the business folks, HR, even the patients themselves from a personal perspective, where just in totality, if everybody were to embrace that security culture and mindset, I think we would all be in a better place and win. So with that being said, I think I'll leave you guys off with the statement of we are in the future, and thank you for your time.